Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, today is truly an occasion to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Ipieca, the idea of the power of partnerships being the theme of this conference, and therefore enabling us to also look back on a history that UNEP and Ipieca have indeed walked together for 4 decades. The establishment of Ipieca was one of the first partnerships that UNEP also was very actively engaged in establishing with industry and private sector. Our own establishment in 1972, following the Stockholm Conference, was an expression of member states, but also the public, that the issue of environment, of sustainability, also of corporate responsibility in that respect, were issues that needed far greater attention. In establishing the Environment Programme of the United Nations, the international community wanted to create a center of expertise, but also a center in which policy, partnerships and engagements would allow us to move forward together. The power of partnerships is something that I think we can proudly look back over the last 4 decades and say that Ipieca and UNEP have on many occasions been able to bring together perhaps universes of actors and outlooks that are not automatically seen to be acting in unison. I want to recognize the leadership that Ipieca and through Ipieca many of you as individuals have also provided. You come from an industry that is fundamental to the success story of 200 years of modern development on our planet. You are at the heart also of some of the greatest challenges that we now face in making a transition towards a green economy, in which low carbon pathways for our economies and societies have become an imperative, where our dependence on fossil fuels clearly will continue for decades, if not longer. The question is, by joining hands and by working together on the technology frontier, also on the policy frontier, and by jointly being able to help consumers, economies, industry, all those who use energy and depend on oil and gas, to try and manage what traditionally has been referred to as externalities in future in a way that they become less of a liability for the sustainability of development altogether. I would like to take 3 examples in our joint history over these 4 decades to illustrate how effective and also how committed this partnership has been. The first one is the Partnership for Clean Fuel in Vehicles. By cooperating from the early 2000s onwards on trying to eliminate lead from fuels across the world, we can truly look back on a decade and a half that has allowed us to reach a point today where there is virtually no country left, I think it is about 4 or 5, where lead is still being sold in fuels. This is a tremendous success story, both in terms of cooperation, in terms of the industry taking a lead role, but also of public policy and government setting the right incentives, legislation and parameters for us to say goodbye to something that maybe 20, 30 years ago we thought was absolutely essential. But today, in fact, we know we did not need anymore. The benefits are obvious to industry, to engines, to the health of people, and ultimately also to our economies and societies, not to say the environment as a whole. This partnership has allowed us to work together on identifying opportunities for joint action, helping each other from the public policy area, from the private sector area, but also from the point of view of citizens and public awareness, to make a shift that at the end of the day is so obvious today but seemed to be very controversial when we began our work. This is where Ipieca also has been central to trying to bring the forces in industry, the early movers, the progressive actors, and also sometimes individuals who are committed to actually translating science into action and thereby helping both the industry and our societies to move forward. This partnership for cleaner fuels and vehicles is continuing today as we also face the challenge of sulfur. UNEP is headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya. When I arrived here 5, 6 years ago, we were still selling fuel on this market and having to purchase it as consumers with 10,000 parts per million of sulfur. If you spend an hour or 2 in the traffic jams of Nairobi today, you still taste it on your tongue. You know that the consequences of breathing in what is a dirty fuel by comparison of the standards that many other countries have already put in place. It is not by choice that Kenya has been able to not move forward on this. But in recent years, through our partnership, through public policy in Kenya, and also an engagement of the industry, we are now moving rapidly forward to enable not only Kenya, but also the Eastern African region to very soon move towards a 500 and perhaps in the not too distant future, a 50 parts per million sulfur content in fuels. Indeed, the whole continent of Africa is held captive to an old technology of refineries that is preventing us from moving forward and doing something that simply is accepted as normal and as an ethical and also industry standard in many countries across the world already. Yet 1 billion people on this continent continue to have to buy fuels that simply are not up to the standard. It is again through our partnership that we have moved forward here and we have been able to make significant successes. A second example, biodiversity. Ipieca's Biodiversity Working Group has been a key partner for us in UNEP, but also many others who are working on the issue of biodiversity and ecosystems to cooperate with the oil and gas industry in order to try and first of all understand where are the major impacts of oil and gas exploration, and also how could we, together with industry, try to lower that footprint to begin to eliminate the easy or low-hanging fruit where we can make progress, and to agree on strategies that would allow us to ultimately work together as partners to reduce the impact on biodiversity that the industry around oil and gas has created and continues to create. The World Conservation Monitoring Center of UNEP in Cambridge has been a key partner with Ipieca to try and bring both the science and also the application of that science in decision making as to where you drill, how you manage, if you want, the full cycle of your industry in such a way that the impact on biodiversity and ecosystems will be lower. It is a partnership I think we both acknowledge has been very successful, albeit not yet sufficient to really say that we have a net positive impact on biodiversity. At the end of the day, colleagues, that remains the ambition. Because whatever we do in the 21st century, the cumulative impact today of 7, soon 8, 9 billion people on our environment and therefore on our life support systems, on the health of individuals, but also on healthy environments for a successful future development path, will depend on us all working towards a goal of having a net positive biodiversity impact. I want to congratulate Ipieca and also WCMC and many other elements in the environmental community and also in the United Nations Environment Programme Secretariat for having invested in this partnership. I hope it will continue to both draw the attention to the necessity to work together on these issues as much in actually achieving scalable impacts. Finally, let me not only look back in history. We are celebrating the 40th and I hope we will celebrate many more anniversaries of our partnership. The latest project on which we are working together very actively is the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. The oil and gas industry is a critical part in trying to address, for instance, the emissions and releases of methane. Our partnership on methane that is now being developed with Ipieca and the Climate Clean Air Coalition is another important example of how together we can begin to tackle one of those supposedly low-hanging fruit. Gas flaring is one example that stands out for us all today, where we have to ask ourselves, even if it is commercially not so interesting yet to capture all that flared gas, is it not something that we need to do? The Climate Clean Air Coalition, together with the science that UNEP has provided on short-lived climate pollutants, makes a very clear case. We need to act. We need to act fast, and we need to act together with your support. We are very conscious of the fact that we cannot in one go bring every actor in the industry to actually address themselves to this issue. My appeal to you today, my invitation to you, and also on the occasion of this 40th anniversary, is for those of you, both who are in the room today and are key players in actually making these partnerships work, but also for your companies, your boards and your CEOs, to perhaps make a choice, to be amongst a group of leaders, to be in the industry amongst those who will actually help the world to address an issue that is now an imperative for us to address. We will not address climate change and global warming through reducing gas flaring or the emissions of methane alone. But we are now in such a constrained situation with such a tight timetable in trying to still maintain a strategy that will enable us to be at least in a credible pathway towards keeping global warming within a 2-degree scenario, that every step is necessary and helps. It is clear that the oil and gas industry has a tremendous opportunity, responsibility, but also perhaps a commercial and technological frontier in which it can play a critical role here. I invite you to leave from this 40th anniversary and to return to your companies and to see whether the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, which now includes already 75 members, states from north and south, industry members, scientific organizations. It is a coalition that also builds on other partnerships through the World Bank, the IEA and other partners that are addressing themselves to an issue in which you can make an enormous difference. Together, we can change the way our footprint as humans, as industry and as society will affect the opportunities and choices of future generations. But we should not look in terms of future generations at the next 50 years. It is the next 2, 3, 5 years in which you can make a difference. We need leadership in the industry. We need those who are willing to step one step in advance of where the general consensus currently stands on what is doable. That is how innovation happens. That's how progress has happened. That is how humanity has tackled many of its problems and challenges in history. The 40th anniversary is a wonderful moment to reflect on an extraordinary partnership and the power of partnership also between UNEP and Ipieca over the years, and at the same time to recommit ourselves to continue this success story. We have a lot of work left to do. We will not always be understood by actors in the environmental community or in your industry necessarily for what we're trying to do. But our track record, I think, speaks for itself. Our challenge remains to prove that we can truly make a difference. Thank you for inviting me to join you by means of this video message. I'm very sorry not to be with you today because, as I said at the beginning, this is an anniversary well worth celebrating, and I join you in looking at both the past and at the future with optimism. Thank you.